Hey everyone, I'm Ty, and welcome to the channel where film meets fun. I talk about all things cinema, making it challenging yet entertaining, and in today's video, in honor of the Odyssey out in theaters, I decided to challenge myself to watch Christopher Nolan movies for an entire week. If you haven't seen the other two videos in the One Director One Week series here on the channel, go check those out too. You might find a film you know or haven't seen, and without further ado, let's get straight into the video. A master thief who steals secrets from within people's dreams is offered a chance to reclaim his former life. To do so, he must accomplish the seemingly impossible task of planting an idea into someone's subconscious instead of stealing one. I watched 2010's Inception. Dream state versus reality. How this played out visually was astonishing. How did someone even come up with this concept, let alone have the creative vision to bring it to life? None other than Nolan himself. Figuring out what that would look like for an audience, how to make it visually appealing, and how to craft a compelling story out of something so complicated and subjective was impressive. It could have easily become boring, but it never did, at least not for me. I like dystopian stories, concepts that play with time, and sci-fi narratives with high stakes, so this was right up my alley. Something that bothered me the most about this movie was the let's call their character A, because I forgot how to pronounce it, was played by then Ellen Page, now known as Elliot Page. Every time I saw Page in this film, it reminded me how much I love Beyond Two Souls, but also how frustratingly annoying their character was in that game too. This film was no different. A really annoyed me. I understood that the film wanted to build up Copp's past by using A as a vehicle to uncover it through dream sequences and fragmented memories, but A's constant poking around irritated me. I don't like people who don't mind their business, and A did the absolute most to uncover things that had nothing to do with them. Their motivation made sense if you wanted to justify it that way, but every scene of A digging deeper just annoyed me more. Overall, Leonardo DiCaprio's performance was great. Everyone felt well casted, and I enjoyed following these imaginative dreamlike worlds. Nolan did a great job creating tension and action-driven suspense whenever the story called for it. I will say that this type of movie isn't usually my vibe. As you know, I love horror, and while I definitely felt the runtime on this one, it was also incredibly inventive in a lot of ways. Very memorable. And for that reason, I gave this movie a 4 out of 5. Allied troops becomes trapped on the beach as German forces advance through France. A massive evacuation effort is put into play using military and civilian vessels to successfully rescue soldiers. I watched 2017's Dunkirk. When I tell you I was stressed from beginning to the end of this movie, I mean it. This one had great sound design, cinematography, and score. I already have crippling anxiety whenever I hear planes fly overhead, so every time the aircrafts flew by dropping bombs or opening fire, my anxiety shot through the roof. Beyond that, I don't have a ton to say about this film. Shocker, I know, but it's because it's a war movie. What more can I really add? Especially since it's not a genre I watch very often. War films can be dreadful, exciting, action-packed, or boring, depending on who you ask. For me, they're usually all of those things at once, never quite separating themselves from one another. What made this one stand out, though, was the score, cinematography, and sound design. As I said before, they carried much of the experience for me. Overall, this movie could be for someone. I'm just not that someone, but I can recognize elements I liked about it. I didn't connect with any of these characters, and the story never fully grabbed my attention either, so for that reason, I gave this movie a 2.5 out of 5. Two rival magicians become consumed by a fierce competition for dominance, leading them down a path of obsession, deception, and sacrifice with increasingly dangerous consequences. I watched 2006's The Prestige. It took me a while to get into this one, not because it was bad from the beginning. In fact, it had a really intriguing opening, but because it took me some time to adjust to both the world and the characters. At first, the setting didn't feel fully grounded in reality. The story takes place in the 19th century, yet many of the actors looked like they had been plucked straight out of the early 2000s, which, to be fair, is when the movie was made. Still, I wish they had done more with the hair and makeup to help sell the time period beyond just the costuming and the environment. None of these characters really looked like they belonged in the late 1800s or early 1900s. I just didn't fully buy it. That aside, the non-linear storytelling was incredibly impressive. I also love narration in films, and this movie delivered that through the characters reading one another's journals. Nolan did an excellent job balancing showing and telling. It's something I've come to admire about his work in general. Visually, nothing necessarily jumped out at me. This isn't the kind of movie where you're getting flashy camera angles or elaborate camera movements, but in this case, less was more, and I like that. Watching these characters maneuver around one another, hiding secrets and playing their games was the real draw, and that's exactly what Nolan chose to emphasize. Overall, the movie was intriguing and managed to hold my attention the entire way through. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the best thing I've ever seen, but it was engaging and fun to follow. I enjoyed the themes of obsession, deception, and misguided ambition the most. That said, none of the reveals landed with the level of shock that I think the story was aiming for. Even so, I appreciated how everything came full circle by the end. The way the story unfolded and ultimately wrapped up felt satisfying, and for that reason, I give this movie a 3.5 out of 5. After a personal tragedy, Bruce Wayne commits himself to fighting the crime and corruption consuming Gotham City. Unable to achieve justice through conventional means, he adopts the persona of Batman, a vigilante who strikes fear into the city's criminals. I watched 2005's Batman Begins. When I was a kid, I watched The Dark Knight Rises, so to my surprise, I found out that this was actually the first movie and not that one. I don't remember much about it anyway, so this basically felt like a completely new watch for me. It's always interesting seeing how heroes become heroes, and when the story suddenly ventured into what felt like Kill Bill style training montages with Liam Neeson, I can't lie, it tickled me. It was nice seeing a younger Bruce Wayne and getting a glimpse of his parents, since we all know the universal Batman fact that the man does not have any parents. He's an orphan. Seeing their deaths, which I don't even think counts as a spoiler anymore, was still incredibly disheartening, especially knowing Bruce witnessed it at such a young age. There's something so satisfying about watching the underdog slowly transform into the protective force who stands up against injustice and corruption. I really liked the darker undertones of this movie as well. The lighting and visuals were completely my speed. Take this scene right here. The distortion of Batman's mask looks so cool. It felt very horror adjacent, which I loved, and I absolutely would buy that at a Spirit Halloween. And yes, deep voice Batman is the superior Batman. Christian Bale played Bruce Wayne extremely well. I'm not saying he's the best Batman because Robert Pattinson still has my heart in that department, but he's definitely way better than George Clooney's Batman any day of the week. We also got a good-looking Gordon in this movie, which was exactly how I had imagined Gordon looking, so the casting felt spot on. As for the villain, Scarecrow was aight. The whole fear toxin concept was an interesting power. Making people hallucinate their worst fears is a pretty effective way to terrorize people or, a whole city. I also didn't care about the romance subplot, whatever it was trying to do towards the end. I wasn't even going to pay attention to it. I simply chose to pretend it didn't exist. At this point, I've learned my lesson. Romance in superhero movies is rarely the strongest part of the story, and more often than not, it just leaves me disappointed. I'd rather focus on the main plot anyway. Overall, the gunfights and hand-to-hand combat sequences were fair, but I could already tell this world had the potential to become something even bigger and better, and that's what good sequels are supposed to do, expand on a strong foundation. All I knew after finishing this movie was that Batman was dope. I couldn't wait to continue the trilogy, and I had a really good time with this one. So for that reason, I give this movie a 3.5 out of 5. During World War II, a physicist is chosen to lead the secret Manhattan Project. Working alongside a team of scientists, he helped develop the atomic bomb, culminating in the first successful nuclear test. I watched 2023's Oppenheimer. I wanted to watch this in between the Batman movies because I figured it probably wasn't going to be for me, and honestly, I just wanted to get it out of the way because I knew it was going to be a long movie. Let's start with what I did like. I liked the way Nolan used black and white to signal others' POV and color color to signal Oppenheimer's POV. The film was incredibly well shot, well acted, and backed by a strong pulsing score filled with chilling sound design. I genuinely can't imagine witnessing a bomb of that magnitude with my own eyes. It's one of those things that my brain simply cannot fully comprehend, and I never want to. The way Nolan handled the bomb sequence was pure cinema. The sound design during that moment was especially effective and made the scene feel both awe-inspiring and horrifying at the same time. One thing I am grateful for is that this movie pushed me to do more research on World War II afterward. I remember learning about it briefly in school, but not enough to fully grasp the scale of everything that happened. The number of people who died in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is truly incomprehensible. The sheer destruction, the years it took to rebuild, the generational trauma left behind by those events are all heartbreaking to think about. Looking back on it now, it's difficult to not feel saddened by how much suffering came from decisions made during that period of history. It's touched on briefly through Oppenheimer's bouts of his troubled hallucinations, most likely triggered by guilt and regret. But man, oh man, that type of destruction is actually crazy. Overall, I never felt completely connected to this movie, and I'm mostly like that when it comes to movies about a prominent figure. It's not the type of movie I actively choose to sit down and watch. Sometimes films surprise me, and I end up liking something I wasn't expecting to like, or I discover a new appreciation for a subject I normally wouldn't seek out, like World War II. Other times, my expectations end up being correct, and in this case, they were. I didn't hate the movie, and it definitely held my attention, even during moments when I was fighting the urge to doze off. But when I walked away from it, I felt conflicted because my lack of enthusiasm had less to do with the filmmaking itself and more to do with my personal interest in the subject matter. So for that reason, I decided to leave Oppenheimer unrated. Batman intensifies his fight against crime and joins forces with the lieutenant and district attorney to take down Gotham's criminal underworld. Their successes is threatened by the arrival of a villain, one whose chaos and unpredictability throws the city into turmoil. I watched 2008's The Dark Knight. That's right, we are back to finishing off Batman. To finish the trilogy, of course. One thing I appreciated right away was the perspective shift. Instead of starting with Batman, the movie opened with the criminals. Beginning with the Joker was a genius choice because it immediately gave us a glimpse of the chaos that was coming and at the same time threw us straight into the action, which I prefer. Nolan always seems to understand the importance of balance, giving his films those natural ebbs and flows between quieter character moments and larger set pieces. Like Batman Begins, this film was dark visually and thematically. The blacks and shadows had a lot of depth and richness to them, sometimes even reflecting under the harsh white lighting used throughout the movie. Speaking of which, I noticed that sterile white light bouncing off the actors' faces in several scenes. Personally, I still preferred the more natural lighting approach, but it fit the colder atmosphere the movie was going for. I also noticed that the character Rachel Dawes was recasted. She was originally played by Katie Holmes in Batman Begins, but in this movie, the role was taken over by Maggie Gyllenhaal. Either way, I couldn't have cared less about Rachel as a character, but the way she did die in this movie was absolutely evil work. Meanwhile, we were introduced to Harvey Dent and, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Joker. Heath Ledger is the best Joker. Rest in peace. This man knew exactly how to play a villain. As far as Batman villains go, Joker is still my favorite. He's the perfect combination of comedic relief, tension, unpredictability, suspense, and outright villainy. Every time he appeared on screen, it felt like anything could happen. Nolan also knew how to build tension without relying on the over-the-top grandiose action sequences. The action was exciting, but it never felt like it was trying to overwhelm everything else happening in the film. Overall, I honestly have very little bad to say about this film. If I'm being honest though, this felt more like a Joker movie than a Batman movie. Heath Ledger completely stole the show. Batman felt like he was living in Joker's world rather than the other way around. This film had a clear narrative, a bleak atmosphere, and some of the strongest performances in the trilogy so far, and for that reason, I gave this movie a 4.5 out of 5. After taking the blame for Harvey Dent's crimes, Batman disappears and becomes a fugitive from the law. 8 years later, he returns when a ruthless villain threatens Gotham, forcing the Dark Knight to rise once again and defend the city that turned against him. I watched 2012's The Dark Knight Rises. Bane was introduced right away, and I couldn't get over how strange his voice sounded to me. As an opening villain, he didn't make as strong of a first impression as the Joker did in the previous film, but the movie definitely wasn't lacking in action. Tom Hardy looked absolutely massive in this role. Dude was stacked. Apparently, he gained around 30 pounds to bulk up for this part, so yeah, it showed. The size difference between Bane and Batman was staggering. What made Bane intimidating wasn't necessarily his personality, but what he was capable of. This man was pure chaos. The destruction he unleashed on Gotham and the scale of his plans were some of the most exciting and terrifying parts of the movie. Following up a villain like the Joker is an impossible task, yet Bane still managed to carve out his own identity and leave an impression. Not better than the Joker, but definitely better than Scarecrow. On the other side of things, Anne Hathaway was cast as Catwoman, which I didn't mind. She wouldn't have been my first choice on paper, but I thought she played the role well, especially during those moments when Selina slipped into the helpless, innocent, woe is me act before revealing what she was actually up to. She isn't my favorite Catwoman, but I also don't have a huge list of Catwomen to compare her against, so I'll just leave it at that. One thing that really disappointed me was how Gordon was handled in this movie. It reminded me of Laurie Strode in Halloween Kills, just stuck in a hospital for what felt like the entire runtime, which was unfortunate because one of my favorite parts of the previous films was the dynamic between Gordon and Batman. I liked seeing them work together, helping each other behind the scenes and trying to keep Gotham from falling apart. That partnership felt largely absent here, and I definitely missed it. Overall, it wasn't until the nuclear bomb was introduced as the main threat that the story really started to grab me. If the entire city is at risk, now you've got my attention. Unfortunately, it took well over an hour to get to that point. Even though the first half of the movie didn't fully pique my interest, the second half became much bigger, more intense, and more engaging once the stakes were raised. And for that reason, I gave this movie a 3.5 out of 5. And that's it. The one thing I learned from watching all of these Christopher Nolan films is that he definitely has a time fetish, and who am I to kink shame when the outcome is this good? All in all, Christopher Nolan is that guy. If you've seen The Odyssey already, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, let me know your favorite and least favorite Nolan films. If you want to see what I'm watching in real time, follow me on Letterboxd, link in the description. If you like Batman, he also shows up in Lego form in this video here where I watched, rated, and reviewed animated movies. Go watch that if you haven't already. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.